we're going to talk about cybersecurity with great friends and experts. Hello, Horacio. Can you see us? Can you hear us? Hello. Horacio is the Chief Director of Cybersecurity Office, um, and he's taken some time to be here with us today. And he is studying at the University of Scalabrini Ortiz. He holds he's doing a degree in cybersecurity. And we also have Humberto Cortés Barragan. He is from Mexico, he's from Huawei, and he's also a specialist in cybersecurity. And we also have Adrián Eduardo Acosta, who worked for several years in Interpol, and now he works in the Federal Police in Argentina. And we also have Karina Dilarda, and you're also working in cybersecurity. So we also have another woman here working in cybersecurity. Karina, hello. Thank you all for being here today. This is the last panel of today. So we got participants from Latin America. We have live interpreting, English, Spanish, and we have 2 YouTube channels. Hello, can you hear me okay? Hello, thank you. Thanks to the school for inviting us. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. We're going to start with the first question with the gentleman at my right. The first question is, what are the greatest challenges that we have today related to cybersecurity for developing countries? Thank you. How much time do we have? Minutes. To be honest, the challenges are many, and I think we could mention a few that are common and have different aspects in common, not only cybersecurity, cybercrime, and other aspects of different investigations, which is legislation. So what we are achieving after many years in some environments, for example, in child sex abuse, we're harmonizing legislations at a regional level, but there's still a long way to go. And the greatest challenge in terms of legislation is to achieve a more dynamic law. We need to be more up to date in regard to something that is happening today. We do live in a physical world, but also in a digital world. But the laws are only physical, and that's the greatest challenge. But we have another one. Not only we need to be up to date with technological tools, but we also need to have our knowledge up to date. That is a great challenge. We need to live up to the circumstances, and we should be able to research and develop some tools to stop those criminal organizations. So we need to be able to dismantle them and get them out, being anonymous. How do we achieve that with human resources? How do we have our human resources up to date and well trained? We don't need only one person who knows everything, but we need a team with a broad knowledge, with diverse knowledge. We don't want a hacker or a great specialist. We would like to have small specialists, but everyone working as a team. That's what we need, teamwork. In our education, they teach us how to compete in primary, secondary school. They teach us how to compete to get the best mark, to hold the flag, and to be at the top of the class. They teach us how to compete, but unfortunately, they don't teach us how to work as a team. And that's the greatest challenge, to work as a team, to create teams. And those who are on the top, our challenge is to train people how to work as a team. Teamwork, that's a key topic, and legislation as well. It's very interesting what you're talking about. I understand that legislation is at government level. Don't know if the corporate area can collaborate and contribute to that as well. And Pablo, I'm sure he'll be able to contribute with education. Let's move on to Umberto, and we will be able to talk about organizations. So, in terms of education, what are the greatest challenges? And we can probably just keep the thread with what Adrian was saying. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with um, so many of you. So we are here going through a unique era in Latin America where all these new technologies and developments have pushed us and taken us that in many areas in our countries we do have an acceleration of technologies, but we're not culturally prepared. Not even from a technical point of view, we are prepared to understand the issues and face the challenges they will present to us. I'm not sure if this is exclusive from Mexico, but in different countries we started to use tools and devices, and up until we don't have a problem, we carry on. But when we have a problem, we go to those manuals to try to resolve it. And in organizations, is in big organizations is where we have challenges. We always have to support the market, organizations, consumers, users, and this process should be more user friendly. We can't put on all the responsibility on the users. The industry has taken vertical steps. And how do we define our passwords? We have to include capital letters, symbols. It's becoming more and more difficult, but this we should make this process more easy, and that will help us to digital development. In terms of corporations, we need to understand that cybersecurity is a comprehensive issue. It's not something we construct as we would be making a cake and then we're going to put the cherry on top. No, that's not how it works. And the ones who are deep into this world, we know that it's to how we prepare the organization so they can respond to the supply chain, they can cooperate with different stakeholders, and this comprehensive work is what's going to lead us to achieve data protection of the users. Thank you, Umberto. Horacio Sorin, are you there? I'm here. Oh, hello, Horacio. How are you? I'm good, thank you. It's great to be online. One question. How has cybersecurity and cybercrime evolved after the pandemic? What are the tendencies? What can you tell us about? How are you working in terms of these cyber attacks? We all know that the pandemic has caused a lot of problems, particularly in Argentina, but also in the region. And the criminal organizations have put their attention in technology. So now they have more possibilities to cause attacks or to cause issues and crime. And so this issue has grown They have very well-known groups in malware, and this happened in Argentina and in the region. And the feature is that their cyber attacks are more direct and narrow. And that's a great worry for us. And Argentina is trying to develop a system on how to stop this, and the government and other organisms are trying to increase the investigations and reports on how to discover these attacks. But we also have other types of cyber crimes, not cyber dependent but assisted with technology, and that might be affecting the users of e-banking systems. When the banks improved their security measures, um, it was more difficult to steal identity. So that stopped people from transferring money to the wrong person. And also, there's been an increase in malware related to banking malware. And so, for example, they steal the company's credentials or the equipments with which that company might do transactions. So, for some companies and businesses, it's very difficult to claim the bank because, of course, they were using their equipment. So we can't even set alarms because if we do transfer money, we're using the same device, and if there are several transactions and transfers, it would be very difficult to prove that that was cybercrime. Those criminals are targeting certain sectors, construction businesses, travel agencies. So that's in brief what we're seeing, in addition to the classic fraud, um, those basic issues like fraud have always been present, cyberbullying and others. Um, and despite that the pandemic has ended, the crime index hasn't decreased at all. Thank you, Horacio.
Que no ceda la
We need to keep raising awareness in the end users so that they do not get caught in phishing or spear phishing in the case of corporations. That is one of the main activities that we are all subjected to, whether within the law enforcement sectors, corporate sectors, the judicial system. Pablo, what would you say about the academic sector as regards these problems? Which are the challenges? How can we solve them? Good afternoon, Caro. Thank you, Olga, Adran, and all the team here at the South School. It's always a pleasure to be here with these great friends. In the academic sector, which is it is an important part for education and training, but also for the future perspective. We need to imagine the future. So we're going to break the rules a little bit. I'm sorry for those who are watching the streaming, but I'm going to walk a little bit because I can see that some of the people are kind of getting tired. So I'm going to ask some questions to the audience. If I tell you IoT, what would you say quickly? 5G. IoT, Internet of Things. What do you think about 5G, fast speed networks, standards, protocols. And what about you, Sol? If I tell you cybersecurity and AI, chat GPT and the mistake of students copying the same answer? Yes, very good. And if I tell you biohacking, what do you think about, Rosan? Okay, so what is the academic role to think about each of these ideas, to get them together and to think about the future? This seemed to be science fiction a few years ago, such as, for example, 3D printers. Today we have sites in which you can learn how to print a weapon in 3D printers. We have also sites in which we can learn about design drugs and to be in contact with the author of that design drug and to design one for us. So to do some investigation on drug trafficking and the precursors of these drugs, which is not the illicit drug itself, but we are going to have somebody, for example, in some country in the world that is going to design a specific drug for Pablo Lázaro. This is something that is taking place nowadays. It's not futuristic. Last year, a hospital in the US with 3D printers with the National University of Córdoba printed using a leaflet, some pills. But imagine how difficult would it be to print an illegal drug? Super easy. So which is going to be the role of the academia? As Carol was saying, we have to imagine beyond the definitions that we'll know about, that IoT goes beyond what we see through definitions. Of course, 5G, as our friend was saying, is going to foster that, but nevertheless, if we analyze it from the academic point of view, we're going to see that IoT is not going to be the problem, but the growth of IoT is going to be the problem. And the protocol that it uses is part of traditional cybersecurity. It's a small computer that uses TCP/IP and some protocols that we all know about. And we have several other problems as we have OT. The speaker from Fortinet was saying in the morning that cybersecurity in the industrial world, somebody joined the world of IT, cybersecurity, and operational networks. And when they connected those two worlds, the risks increased exponentially. As we have seen through that presentation, maybe a water facility may be attacked using OT. So the challenge is for the academia is to have professionals that are trained to develop tools that would allow us to be a step forwards. That is quite difficult for several reasons. First of all, as Adrian was saying, all the states, but specifically the Argentinian state, considers itself like a huge ship that has different compartments. And those, the criminals do not have those compartments. And there are also some geopolitical problems today. Maybe you have listened somebody say you don't have to use that because it is forbidden by somebody else because of some political problems. Nevertheless, although we have those huge challenges, our role is going to be very important. It's going to be vital to raise awareness, to imagine the future, and to dare to suggest some things that seemed to be impossible a few years ago, like printing a weapon with a 3D printer or printing a drug. And today, those things that seem to be science fiction are a reality. Biohacking, today we have some microchips that are implanted under the skin in order to inject insulin to measure blood in sugar in blood. So how long do you think it's going to take for that to be attacked? Today, that is controlled through some apps. We have some friends in Argentina that, because of some different kind of accidents, they have a hearing device implanted, and that is run through an app. The protocol is going to be the same. The use is multiple, and the risks exponentially grow. This is my brief presentation, because if I continue, I'm going to run out of time. I was thinking, Pablo, about awareness, bringing awareness and capacity building. So, Adri, thinking that ransomware has some kind of well-known solution that has to do with training, with awareness, I would like to ask you if cryptocurrencies, or do cryptocurrencies have a specific role in ransomware attacks? When we talk about ransomware and awareness, we know that the backup is the system with which we can recover from a ransomware. So let's tell us a little bit about it. Thank you. Yes. Actually, ransomware, although since the early 2000s, when we started using crypto assets with the creation of the Bitcoin, criminals start creation of the Bitcoin. Criminals started looking for a way to charge for their services without using the traditional financial system, without using paper money. And in 2015, we had one of the first ransomwares. A few years later, after the development of bitcoins in 2015, in 6 years, criminals started charging their services through crypto assets. Although it was like a warning against money laundering, also what Pablo was saying took place. There were new things that we didn't expect it. We didn't have like a perspective for that. We were not thinking about the future, but we were considering all this in hindsight. So criminals are thinking how to use and how to make our security vulnerable. So ransomware was one of those tools that they developed. It improved their system by using crypto assets, because ransomware is not that the one that using it is in Argentina and the victim is also here. It could be in anywhere in the world, and the victim could be also anywhere in the world. But crypto assets have no borders. Crypto assets changed internet. Internet that had to do with information, which had the value, which was information. The big information companies such as Google, Facebook, social media, such as Mercado Libre and all these e-commerce companies handle information. But in 2009, we changed from Internet of Information to Internet of Information plus cryptocurrencies, crypto assets. And there are two things that criminals considered here, which was that it can be stored and that it can be transported without problems. You can move cryptocurrency without problems. And there's a third element that criminals considered, that is that law enforcement agencies didn't know how to prevent this or what to do about this. The lack of knowledge of these agencies make it that we didn't know if bitcoins could be split, or if there was a kind of traceability for bitcoins. I'm mentioning Bitcoin because it was the first one. But there are several cryptocurrencies which are traceable. If you give me a wallet and you tell me deposit some bitcoins here, I can deposit and I can trace who deposited those bitcoins and who deposited the person that deposited me, and I can see where my bitcoins were transferred to. We didn't know that in 2015, unfortunately, because we lack future perspective knowledge, and we were not considering the future. And today we have a totally different scenario in which we have people trained to investigate within the police forces. The public ministry, Horacio Sorin, that is there, is one of the persons who knows a lot about crypto assets. He's a district attorney who has a lot of knowledge on technology and who learned a lot about crypto assets. And we have kind of a balance, and we are bridging the gaps that appear when cryptocurrencies were developed. So today we do have a way of investigating, of seizing crypto assets that didn't exist before. And together with Horacio, we are developing a seizing protocol as regards crypto assets so that all law enforcement agencies know how to do it. So it has to do with protocols, legislation, knowledge. It's like a set of tools that lead us to having a different capacity today than we had years ago. Great. Thank you, Adri. So we are always talking about the same thing: training, resources, tools, the need to have knowledge on this. I'm going to have a job in the future. Yes, we all are going to have jobs in the future about this. Horacio, I wanted to ask you a question as regards what Adrian was saying. Can you tell us if ransomware is a crime that is committed against small companies, big corporations? Can you tell us a little bit about this? In order to have an idea, or so that we can inform the audience if this is a problem for big corporations or not, and who can resort to the district attorney's offices, and which are the premises that should be done. Historically, ransomware affected, it was actually at random. And since the pandemic, we started seeing more cases in the public sector, but more connected to well-known ransomware groups which have some communication tools online with a control board telling us when they are going to release the information. But there continued to be some random ransomware affecting not only companies but individuals. So everybody should take care or be careful with ransomware, which is quite difficult actually. And as my colleagues in the panel were saying, the solution has to do with what human beings can do. It has to do with not only prevention, but also implementing different policies to solve the problem if we are faced with ransomware. It has to do sometimes with lack of backup, and ransomware is also targeted at the public sector, and not a specific sector, but maybe a specific company connected with some kind of previous infiltration. So it's not only ransomware, but they get in, they see your bills and your billing, and they ask for a ransom considering or taking into account the value of your business. So it's not that they are going to ask you for 2.5 Bitcoin. They know exactly what your billing numbers are. They know that you have a certain project, and they know your context and your situation. So it's more kind of targeted. I work in the district attorney's office in the city of Buenos Aires. We work with federal crimes all over the country. So who can report to the district attorney these kind of crimes, everybody. But we are going to take all federal crimes and non-federal crimes from the city of Buenos Aires. So first of all, what we require the individual is if they have a crime to report that has to do with our expertise, we need the details and all the information, and if it is a ransomware, we're going to require more technical information. We are going to ask them to send us the conclusions of the response team. We're going to ask information about the technology, the network, the extension of the damage, if they had some problems with the equipment, with the systems. So we need all the details of the context of the situation and to see what we can do about the attack. Sometimes we understand that the priority, of course, is to put the services online once again, and from there we start doing investigations. If the case is not, it doesn't belong to our jurisdiction, we try to connect the individuals with the district attorney's office that should take care of these kind of crimes. Thank you, Ora. It was quite clear. If you have questions, but I believe that ransomware continues to be an everyday problem that can be targeted at small companies or also big companies, and cybercrime evolves. So ransomware is one of the attacks that evolved, and criminals at the beginning tried to cheat, saying that it was the police, but then they started with some kind of extortions, and companies and the public sector started using backup, but they now steal your information, and they threaten to publish that information. And information is very valuable today, such as any material asset. So in the cyber sector, everything evolves quite quickly. So once again, I repeat what Pablo said. We need to think into the future and not only about the situation today, because criminals are always thinking about the future. Adri, talking about these targeted attacks, data leaks, now my question for you, Umberto, is which are the tools that exist so that companies can avoid this kind of imminent and resilient attacks, data leaks, ransomware, targeted attacks? I believe that sometimes we try to think about some problems that take place in all industries in a general way, although some of those problems are global problems that are common for all industries. Actually, the different industries have different kind of preparation in that sense. Sometimes we have to experience in some countries in Latin America that to have more regulations is kind of the only solution. But when we think about a set of tools and elements that can help us, I believe that we should consider those in a comprehensive way. It's not such a huge problem or multi-sectorial problem, but from our perspective, our customers, for our customers, depending on the customer we are talking about, the kind of customer, their assets, and what they value, which could be maybe information or their pictures are very valuable, or other kind of data that are more sensitive that you can have in your cell phone, you have the capacity to be able to have a backup and to implement some security measures. But in a general context, I believe that within the tools that the telecom industry specifically works with, I believe that one has to do with business control to bring awareness at the formal level to set the different political accountability and some formal processes that would allow companies, without the need to implement some systems, to have some control mechanisms to mitigate risks. And on the other hand, today we do have some technological elements, some technological products that help us be ready. When we talk about considering the future, I believe that many of the stakeholders in the ecosystem participate in this because we need to think about this future and to try to harmonize it with the society and with people. So this kind of innovation power that we have also has to do with bringing consensus. First, when you were asking all what they understood by certain concepts, I also think that when we ask this question in an open way, maybe the same question to different people, we can see that the meaning of something that for us is the same, for other people it's another thing. So in that sense, I believe that promoting global and mature standards is going to help us to develop a language and to get ready from the point of view of products as well as processes. It wouldn't be worth it to have products which have certain or the best specifications or the most strict or the stricter standards if at the end of the day we are not going to use them with certain processes in the organizations that will help us to have two phases. For example, the culture of organizations, governments, and all the groups of individuals can be stronger, and at the end of the day, that is going to offer more resilience, and on the other hand, to have different technological breakthroughs, all the cloud capabilities, all the services that offer online backup to be more protected. Thank you, Humberto. Undoubtedly, we should approach a cybersecurity maturity that is going to require soft skills such as training, awareness, and that connection that we have with technology, and of course technological controls and maturity standards that we should all be aligned with to talk about the same thing. Now, Pablo, how do we bridge this soft keys tools gap? How can we have more cybersecurity professionals at the international level as well as in Argentina, so that these different vertical aspects that we should consider can be taken into account? Fortunately, there is more and more possibilities. There are different careers. Today I'm representing one of them, but there are many, and there's a lot of interest. So we are connecting the links here. There are lots of offers for training. Actually, companies have cooperated a lot. There are some certifications that the different vendors offer with some quick certifications with possibility of employment, and we have the possibility of student retention. So we need to have retention of people interested when you are thinking about a career. In general terms, for our generation, when we were talking about a 4 or 5 year career, it was something common, but today it seems like too long, too far away. So we have some challenges that have to do with shorter certifications. So our adversary are YouTube or Facebook certifications, which in general terms, they believe that with that small technical knowledge, they are going to be trained for many things. To a certain extent, it may be possible to have some knowledge, but the knowledge that you get when you are a professional, it's going to be done when you have not only the certification, but the mindset and the openness to do some futuristic thinking to develop some projects. So universities are the ones that are training professionals, maybe a PhD or a technical career. Uh, I, b- I'm talking about universities no matter which studies they choose. Because in the first years, many people in the more technical studies, such as cybersecurity, IT, get great employments, which are gainful employment. And so through certain certifications, you can have this uh, student retention, and today we have an important student retention level in many of the courses of study. Uh, Student retention is vital, according to the last report on the World Bank as regards talent in cybersecurity. We need to close the gap between the academia and certification so that it all goes hand in hand, so that talent retention in cybersecurity can comply with what the system requires, the market requires. I'm going to get up once again. When historically we talk about public-private participation or involvement, what are we talking about? The academic, public-private sector. Those are the three sectors we mentioned. The academia, the public, and the private sector, because the academia has a specific role, which is perspective, thinking about the future. Easy to say, but hard to carry out. The multi-stakeholder model. If we still have lots of problems with public-private participation or involvement, most crimes go or start in private platforms, and then the public sector has to take care of that. If that private-public involvement is difficult, imagine public-private academic involvement is really hard. But for the academia, we actually are part of the private public sector, and it's also been proved that it has to do with talent retention, because you are offering training tools that are going to help you help the professionals and help organizations. And with this, I am finishing. Some of you are afraid that I'm going to ask you a question, so you pay a lot of attention. Henry Ford was asked once, aren't you afraid of training your personnel and then they leave your company? No, I would rather have them trained and leave the company than stay in my company and not being trained. Thank you. I believe that is very important for retention for organizations.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I think it's very interesting, all of these topics. And should we start a round of questions, please? So put your hands up. Where should we start? Let's start by virtual questions. So he is sending us the questions all of the virtual audience. So the first question is, what protocol do you follow? So the chain of digital proof is that to avoid it to broken. What interventions do you apply in the processes? And the second one, what is the territorial jurisdictions and what agreements or norms can be applied if the attack is from cross-border? One from Horacio and the other one. I think it might be a ransom attack. So we're not the experts in this field that we do, that we look after the evidence. For that, we have a team of researchers There is a protocol of digital evidence, which is the one that we use in these cases and in any other scenarios in which we have to survey digital evidence. What we do is that all the evidence collected in a cyber attack, we need to make sure that it's adequately collected, and we tend to use the international agreements. If the country of origin is a member of the Budapest Commission, which is the better prepared to treat these cases, would they have a specific commission for cybercrime, and they also have a commission for ransomware and for data protection. But if the country of origin is not in the Budapest Convention, so we use the United Nations agreement. But if we could put in a framework the the group that's causing the attack, if it's an occasional crime or it's organized crime, so that will help us to decide which law we follow or convention. And this also the length of the sentence that would apply, that also help us to choose which convention we will choose. And sometimes, and with this I will be closing the question, in the United Nations frames there is a negotiation process about cybercrime, which is still in process, but that convention would try to add and include those countries which are not in the convention at the moment, and we could use that convention for those cases. I'd like to make some comments. I'd like to thank the interpreters and translators, because if they have overcome Horacio and Christopher today, you are the best ones in the world. A round of applause, please. Thank you. And I also like to mention that this school is bilingual, Spanish, Portuguese, so we can take questions in Spanish, Portuguese. If we cannot understand, I will translate. Thank you.
I hope that you can understand. I'm going to speak slowly. I am from Brazil. There are several debates and discussions in the region as regards indigenous people. And people talk a lot there about safeguards because it is a way of protecting communities from the different projects. You mentioned biohacking, and in that sector there are some pharmaceutical companies which use bioactives and things like that. And I wanted to ask you how much, as regards biohacking, which kind of protection or those communities, the indigenous people, which kind of protection do we have for those people, the different initiatives that may exist? She's doing some research about the carbon footprint in the Amazonia, and she specifically was asking about how to protect biohacking specifically for people living in that area, indigenous people, or people living in that area. If there's some knowledge about biohacking protection for communities in that area of the Amazonia.
Mano, digo,
This topic of biohacking is very wide. Particularly, I was talking about an extension of AeroP, as I could inject a chip and use an app to interfere through a microchip and an app is possible. Um, we can imagine that it will be possible, but it also has to do with the development of certain illegal drugs that have to do with technology. For example, the mono monoclonal, which has one molecule. So monoclonal development medication is related with artificial intelligence. And we all know that the risk of artificial intelligence has to do with bias, how they can infer or get to conclusions. So it's related to the vulnerable sectors, but also it's more related to regulations. Of course, raising awareness is a very important fact. The final user as well, because they have to be able to understand how to use this technology. And in this regard, I think it's very interesting what someone from Mexico who's in the audience mentioned, that in terms of consumers, a consumer implemented a system in which one can demand the companies that the systems, the IT system, um, medicines, they con- they add security in their service. So we can make a complaint if the service or the product does not comply with the minimum requirements of security and safety. That is regulation, good practices as well. Of course, raising awareness, as we mentioned throughout this debate, but we also need mechanisms to be able to put a complaint, and that complaint should reach the right team and level to be resolved. We could have a whole conference on that topic. And here we got another question. I'm Reis Enrique.
vou falar.
I'm also from Brazil. I'm going to speak in Portuguese. I'm going to do it slowly. My question would be for Adrian. There are some questions that have to do with some research in which some fundamental protections should be researched. There are some initiatives in the European community that have to do with information investigated or researched, and I wanted to know your opinion on how to develop those or how to weight that and how to fight crime in that sense, since this way of protecting data is important for all of us. It was difficult. I didn't understand anything. It was difficult for me as well. I speak Portuguese, but can somebody do it? Because it was too much for me as well. Actually, the question is, When there's some investigation about cybercrime, how do we protect data of the people being investigated? There are some regulations in Europe, 608, that take into account the protection of the information or data of people being investigated. So his question would be, how in Argentina are you considering that of if there are certain limitations to protect data of those being investigated? Well, it's quite a difficult question.
When there is an investigation, of course, everything is kept under maximum secrecy to respect that investigation. So we would not reveal who we are investigating. After that, it will go to the Ministry of Justice, the judge, who will carry on with the investigation and will keep control of the investigation. So this is completely secret. No one that is not participating on the investigation will be able to see who's being investigated. However, once that process is finished, in the court, maybe a lawyer, civil lawyer, um, penal lawyer, um, mm, they might be able to, of course, to see, but at the moment, if it's under investigation, or maybe Horacio, you can give me a hand on this, but during the investigation process, everything is kept under secret. Although there isn't a law of data protection specifically orientated to this in Argentina, although Argentina has a data protection law, which is one of the oldest ones in Latin America, it's not up to date. Therefore, currently we have different projects to make this law up to date, because as is one of the oldest ones, at the time we didn't have the level of digitalization that we currently have today. So Europe has moved fastly forward in this topic, is much more advanced than Latin America. They already have countries that have in Latin America as well. But for example, Brazil, they already have the data protection law, but also in the civil framework, internet civil framework, and in other points. We really need to have an up-to-date law that is up to date with our digital reality, which is what Europe did. And a company might have to pay a penalty of millions of dollars if they not comply with that law. The advantage is that the owner of the investigation is the judge. So we don't have a database of investigations or forensic investigations, and we accumulate that information. It's impossible. I have to ask for permission from the judge to access the data and the information in any given investigation at any given point. In future, we don't know. I don't know if Horacio is around here, and I don't know what's your opinion on this. Um, this camera makes you look a bit bigger. I want to say that that's not a great camera. So while we wait for Horacio, we have more questions. It's for the whole panel, whoever wants to answer. What's the method to carry out technologic protection and to have results in order to anticipate to potential issues that might come in the future? And what would be the priorities, and what should we be focusing on in practical terms? From my academic point of view, there are several methods, matrix, Delphi, and other academic methods in addition to the technology. In particular, when we talk about cybersecurity, we use focus group because we do need to know what the issues are to be able to project it. And in terms of impact matrix, cross impact matrix, so we need to isolate it in small issues and then see how those small issues, once we break them down, they can evolve. So using small variables in the future, so put them into perspective, and then we can plan backwards and we can see how those variables can achieve that scenario that we imagine with next probability. So we do that in marketing, in science, in cybersecurity as well, and we apply it from an academic point of view. We imagine the potential scenarios, but we also use it for like physical security, for example, in airports. So I was saying to one of my colleagues, I also work for a federal force which is orientated to airport security. We have cameras and we have other devices, and we look after that information. But we also need to project um, and we need to think how criminals do to find different ways to board planes with illegal substances. Everyone has seen that program, right? So, for example, the scanners sometimes fail depending on the width. So, for example, if there is ice, so hyper frozen elements, things might not be detected, so we might not be able to see what's inside something frozen. So we can start, or we can imagine what could be inside the ice. So, what methods do we develop to find out what's inside them? Could be an explosive, could be anything. Another issue could be in wigs, because the density of the hair in the wigs, we might not be able to advert what's in there. And you might have noticed that no one touches your hair or head when you cross the scanner at the airport, but that might change. So there are many academic methods, but we can resume where are we heading towards, so how can we develop efficiency in those methods, thinking as a criminals. I've got a question, and I got a cybersecurity company in Belgium. So companies, they buy the equipments, but then no one looks after or takes care of those equipments, and they are attacked anyway. Is this true? Is this a reality? Are there companies that invest in in devices, cybersecurity? So they do invest, but they don't do the work that comes afterwards in terms of human resources and understanding how those equipments work. Is this real or is an exaggeration? I think that at the end of the day, this is maybe a strong declaration, a strong remark, but there isn't 100% security. It's not 100% efficient, but as we get more and more prepared, we will be able to fight those attacks. But trying to answer the question, just like in any organization that is in the process of creating technology, before thinking of how much we invest or how we invest, we need to think how we want to be identified by the market. So we can not commit to, or we cannot foresee risks that not really come from us. We just need to make sure that we control our privacy. So once you know how you want to be identified as a company, the rest might follow. There's a tool that I don't think is taking into consideration, which is implementing governance. And all the committees should have as a priority security, but they also have a way to monitor this regarding if we are talking about a country, global level, but this has to be rigorous. As a corporation, the structure should be follow what's really happening in terms of product creation and how we monitor the products. And the other fundamental topic is auditing. It's not enough with saying it is not enough. We need to have teams that can audit and they don't have conflict of interest to ensure that the strategies we are implementing are working. And then we need someone who can tell us that, well, yes, effectively this is working, or no, you have gaps and there's room for improvement. And the third one is got to do with the industry. Because the industry in itself can generate certification for products and processes that can give us an idea of how we're doing, are we improving on this. Let's not forget that cybersecurity is a question of maturity as well, not because now we develop a program or we invest in a product means that tomorrow will be covered. It's a process, and there has to be a follow up, and that follow up needs to be rigorous. Can I add something, please? I'm Argentinian, so I like talking. Back to companies that they buy the best server software, and when we go and look and see what happens, maybe the configuration wasn't right. So maybe they had a security gap, they thought they had to connect it, and that was it. That's that's not how it works. Um, so
La clave era admin, admin.
they didn't change the password. The password was admin, admin. Let's go back to Pablo. Thank you. Um, Good afternoon. I'm from Guatemala. I've got a question regarding forensics. So,
There are some principles in terms of research. What caught my attention was the way in approaching some kind of regulation referring to the treatment of data of those people that are investigated. We have the public ministry in Guatemala that prosecutes cases. Currently, there's a system that is real system that compiles all the information that are of the people that are prosecuted, witnesses, and manages artificial intelligence with public records. Manages and compiles the information after being prosecuted, and then the person is tried and judged. Everything is saved within the database that is called STREAM with artificial intelligence. And they have interoperability or interconnections with the civil national police, that would be law enforcement of the public ministry, other organizations of the state like the trade secretary or secretariat, and other organizations, and compile all the information and knows to what extent, or I would like to know that if there's vulnerabilities because the information resides in that database and cannot be erased. In our legislation, there's nothing that may require the physical entity to erase that information. However, that information is saved in the system. And second, regarding the investigations are different. Like these are totally different cases. How did you overcome the challenges of investigations with forensics or experts to treat diversity or evidence in electronic evidence that is electronic saved? Because that doesn't belong to the judge but resides in the public ministry on the prosecutor's office. So how did you prepare those experts? Because in the case of Guatemala, there are no prosecutor offices specifying this. It's a general prosecution office. However, there's no way, specific way of addressing this. I'm sorry that there are so many questions in one.
Vale.
Was it for me? I think it was for you and Horacio as well. The problem I see is not that it's in a database and it's not being deleted. The problem is that that database base might not have the protection that's needed. So, for example, the norm ISO 2701, those norms assure us to have a protected database. So it's not the database. As long as it's used by the appropriate team, the appropriate person, and nobody else who has not the appropriate training has access to it. Why? Because the risk is we fall into stigmatizing someone. If a person has committed a crime and after a sentence has acquired freedom, and then within the law and frame should not be stigmatized. The risk is that that information can be disclosed as someone that at some point has committed a crime but has completed the sentence, and why that information is being disclosed. The problem is not about storing personal data. Either if it's a company, the government, a state, the problem is that that personal data might not have the right protection. That's why the law that our colleague from Brazil, that law from Europe, makes or ensures that those public organisms in the state protect that information. So the data cannot be misused, stolen, or in general cannot be misused, the personal data. So if I give my data, my personal details to a company, I would like that company to have the data, but nobody else. So I don't want to receive a call. So in a minute, in the next 10 minutes, I get a call from a company that's asking me if I had an accident. I don't want my personal data to be disclosed. I don't want other companies to know who I'm a client, because I'm giving my information to one single company. Now, in this case, as our colleague from Guatemala mentioned, the public ministry has the right to administer that information and has to protect it appropriately, because if they don't, that could be also considered a minor crime or a crime. Horacio, I don't know if you want to add something. I'm here. I always been here, but I don't know if you can see me. I agree in everything that you mentioned. I also agree with your comment regarding the camera that makes you look more chubby. I, I think this is the last panel, and we actually got together to make Karina's life more difficult. Because we were expecting that She was saying that that's a great question, and the response was great as well. But no, she surprised us. It's so nice to be among friends. We couldn't say that. We didn't want to mock about that with you. There was another question about how to preserve database and digital assets. We don't have databases on that. I don't know if Horacio has a database on that, but I don't. No, we don't. And that's how I think we don't have that today because, I mean, potentially we might have the possibility in the future to use relevant information. Um, at what point we can keep evidence, um, but there's nothing resolved in Argentina. One might think that, with the exemption of a real need of having um, some digital data, like for example a phone number, um, we might not even have the storage capacity. So in drug trafficking, it might be interesting that we might be able to access some information, like phones, but there should be. But we should be able to save that evidence that might be useful in future, but there might be a lot of other evidence that might not be contemplated. But with this storage issue, um, it might be difficult to achieve that. I'm Rosa Merlin from Mexico. Thank you so much for your remarks. I'd like to ask two questions. One, what is the difference between cybersecurity and IT security? How can we differentiate those? And can we say that we have cyberspace governance, or do we have a sort of recipe that involves different stakeholders and that have achieved consensus? What are the limits? What are the achievements? Secondly, what happens when there is a cyber attack affecting a critical state structure and the cyber defense is becomes active, and we when can we talk about a cyber war, or is it just a cyber crime? When can we talk about cyber war? Can you explain that to us?
Let me take the question from the academic point of view. The difference between IT, cybersecurity, or information security lies in the definition. As the cyberspace is more than the internet, it's a virtual space between people or individuals and devices. Wireless telephony is part of cyberspace, even though necessarily does not reside over the internet. These isolated networks, if we were not to have internet connection with our own LAN, is part of cyberspace as well. Cybersecurity is the set of good practices, procedures, and techniques that make up to the protection that make the protection of cyberspace. And IT security has to do in technical aspects of the learn of technologies, applications of those technologies that are deployed or applied to cyberspace. So the courses of IT security have to do with firewall, networking, file configuration, etc. Whereas cybersecurity has to do with policy making, capacity building, and so many other things where cybersecurity is a very special important component. And if we talk about information security within the interconnected ecosystem, information security is even broader than cyberspace because it comprises physical security, paper on top of a desk, consist of good practices to have a clean desk policy. Something that I share over the elevator when I take the elevator, yeah, is information management or handling as an intrinsic element, the useful element once we process that information. So whatever becomes relevant for the organization, how I treat that, whether it is a voucher, how much time will I save it at a safe place and in an IT or in an electronic file. And then the good practices, procedures in cyberspace, and then IT security would be the technical pillar, the technical aspect of that. But in general terms, when we speak about cyber wars, it's very, very complex because the difference between crimes and a military action has to do with the target. Cyber crime includes the criminal code. If we take over the control of the website and reveal the database, basically I'm committing a cyber crime. In the case of cybercrime law, unauthorized intrusion to systems, and all of that, as in Argentina. However, if we have information of policemen and then I sell it to, or military people to sell it to an adversary or an enemy. So, they may kill the soldiers' relatives. It is a crime, but it's an act of war. So it has to do with the criminal code, international public law. And there are ways, like the Tallinn Protocol. I think that the Tallinn Manual, I think they stand at 2.0 or 2 point something. So is synetics attack before mission critical applications? That is, if you attack a mission critical structure with a missile, and then I retaliate with another missile. In the case of Iran and Israel, you had a retaliation of synetics of a cyber attack. To summarize, it has to do with the law rather than with a technical aspect. So, what is the individual? As ad venom case, that is a reason why to go to war, or a crime that is classified in the criminal code. But the technique is basically the same. What's the fifth element? The fifth element, yes. I totally share what Pablo Lázaro said. And to tell you the truth, there's a very thin line between the ransomware that is affecting a corporation is a crime. However, if it affects a mission critical application or infrastructure, we have to know that it's not a direct attack on the part of the state only or an individual only. Like for example, the wars that are being waged right now, they have the cyber attack component. So it's not merely drones or planes or tanks, the earth, the air, or the oceans. Space is usually considered among these elements, and cyberspace is the fifth element that is becoming so relevant in the wars that are being waged nowadays. So cyber defense should be included. There's no way of getting around without cyber defense because it would be like opening borders and let everybody come in. And mission critical infrastructure under attack would be very significant because it's not affecting the government but society as a whole. Last questions? Be brief so we can conclude by 6. My name is Mario Morales from Guatemala. Great panel. I work in IT, so I am fascinated with everything that you have said. Addressing what Julio said, yes, the public ministry has 2 certifications. What really caught my attention from my colleagues that are aware of these topics, and some of them argued that it was a security issue that was not revealed. So that's another thing. Is it valid, or simply is being unaware of this? Is being unaware of this? The question is if it's valid not to tell what cybersecurity is or the international certification.
¿Podrías repetir la pregunta?
Could you reformulate the question? No, but we don't have time. In 1 minute, I have two sources that I cite. In certifications, they tell me that it's not a public domain. To know what certifications the public ministry has. Is it in Guatemala or is that misinformation? To reveal certifications is not revealing anything. And it's not breaking any rules or secrets. Because there may be technologies behind that certification and processes in place that they're not changing anything at all. Yes, they're not certain that they're not arguing that they have Huawei, Fortinet, or any certifications 24/7. Sometimes for corporations, these certifications are important, and to show them, the public ministry is. I don't think that they are right if they don't do that. But they have to see if they adhere to the good practices, international good practices of cybersecurity. It's no secret to have any certifications. However, the public ministry in Guatemala adopted that policy. Probably they don't have any certifications, or probably they have one and they don't want to disclose it. I don't know why they adopted that stance. Three questions in one, so we can close the panel. We just published in the bulletin server surveillance with AI. Are there any contributions that you can make to cyber surveillance in terms of investigation and regulation of the guidelines of SIM in the United States? That is investigation and art in artificial intelligence regarding open source. Let me address this protocol because I was part of this protocol. So it's a revival of an existing protocol reviewed with or revised. On top of that, with artificial intelligence, we adopted the existing one. Surveillance is the public official or the police that takes in the streets, they can act if they see a crime. But in the case of Argentina, we call it cyber surveillance to match it to to a certain action. If they sell drugs and if it's in the streets, they can file a claim and they may act accordingly. Technically, it's called open source intelligence. That has nothing to do with espionage. However, we know that in Argentina and in our region, when we speak of intel, it's the act of gathering information, disseminating, and systematizing information, but it makes noise. It is usually referred to espionage, but it's not the case. To avoid this discussion, we talk about cyber surveillance. And there were some guidelines on the part of the Ministry of Security to the law enforcement application agencies with the complex crimes, especially with the federal forces like drug trafficking, human trafficking, terrorism, etc. So there's a need to have a protocol in place like this one's because there are many crimes committed in cyberspace. Enforcement, for example, for the sale of drugs or drug trafficking, as they said in one of the forums, they do it over Tinder, for example, uh, dates applications or dates apps. Information that was not being investigated right now is part of the institutional framework, and we were required, or we require law enforcement agencies to implement that. So we believe that cyberspace is going to be safer now. Do you have a few minutes? One clarification. As law enforcement, enforcing protocols by the Ministry of Security, we have some lines and guidelines for experts and for those of you that sometimes aren't aware of this. So the protocol of evidence and cyber surveillance and the protocol that is gonna come out anytime soon for seizing cryptocurrencies or crypto assets in a way is paving the way. And they said, okay, you have to do this or that. And it's good for us. And I'm sure, as Argentina is a federal country where you have many law enforcement agencies and a lot of police at the local level, public ministries, etc., prosecutor's office, they are paving the way because they said at the national level we have this protocol, so you should adopt one or enhance one. I mean, practice makes perfect, so I believe that this is the way. And it covers a gap. It covers a gap because when the Ministry of Security issues this protocol, they tell me there's cybersecurity. That gap should be uh, fulfilled. Yeah, one question for Pablo and Adrian. Especially, what is your opinion? Because sometimes we talk about this, how fake, how far, or how surreal is to think that we have a unique or a single medical record saved in IT in Argentina. What is the system like to implement this medical records of individuals? And how do you think this could be vulnerable if it's saved in the way we have the way we have it in Argentina, and what should be required to implement it to implement the medical records saved, not to have any vulnerabilities or to mitigate risks. I want to travel and I want to have a medical record at hand. If I have to carry that, it would be great because I cannot explain the doctor somewhere else with a language barrier. I'm going to reply with one phrase from our president. There's no money, he says. And if there's no money, there's no storage possible and there's no cybersecurity. You ask me if it's possible. Yeah, of course. You have blockchain technology that allows for maintaining a safe environment faced with this information. So blockchain is a reality. We may have medical records with with blockchain or a single digital identity, a single passport with blockchain. Yes, we could have many things with blockchain. And it's one of the technologies that enable not to forge medical records, to prevent the forgery of other things, to have a safe environment, traceability, transparency. So technology exists. The issue is something else. I remember that drug trafficking is used blockchain to wire money because it goes unnoticed. Blockchain for one things for some things and crypto assets for another. I think that you taught it in the training course in the bar association in Rosario. I think I heard you mention that during the bar association. Not only focus on drug trafficking, but also organized crime and the laundering of assets and criminal organizations that we have nowadays. Obviously, crypto assets are being used by these organizations because, as I said at first, it is easy to save, to carry, and that facilitates certain features that criminal organizations are pursuing. And there's anonymity because they don't have to penetrate in the typical financial problems or financial markets like GAFI, GAFI-LAC, with all the permissions and authorizations that control money laundering. So it's not something that I imagine, it's a reality.
Hola, aquí Diego Liz.
Diego Lizoni from Chile here. One question for Border. Considering that Huawei is a multinational company that offers energy, digital infrastructure, telecommunication services, etc., what are the challenges ahead for Huawei, for a company such as Huawei, especially when there's a regulation passed like the Chilean laws or regulations? W- How do you go about with the local regulations? I mean, when compared to the national federal legislation that is in place nowadays. Indeed, in Chile, which has passed the general cyber security law for all global corporations or multinationals, the challenge ahead of us is to offer an umbrella providing security for users in the marketplace and for the organizations, fully supported by a series of certifications of processes and products, mirroring the embedded security in the processes and in the products themselves. The challenge then that we find is at the local level in every single country, where precisely we need to adapt to the series of requirements that are country specific. There's an issue that has to do with AI, energy, where depending on the priorities placed by countries, there will be some rules that are not that specific but particular because priority is placed on certain issues. So, based on that, our challenge is that this should be customized and adapted in order to fulfill the local guidelines to provide these services for the market and for the local regulations to satisfy those needs. It seems to me that in Chile, what's going on, this is a mature perspective. Chile managed how to address vulnerabilities, incidents, given a framework of respect and inclusion, trying to converge public and private sector organizations, where our work has to do with a comprehensive approach from IT, legal processes, and that lead to cooperation between public and private entities. That I was summarizing in a way would be cooperation and adaptation being country and organization specific. Alejandro Baltasar from Mexico, first and foremost. I take pride in having a countryman like you addressing the presentation here. Umberto, you underscore homo- being homogeneous in concepts, in nomenclatures, regulations, and at the end, you require, or you said that you require uniformity. So, law enforcement agencies, lawyers, lawmakers are basically putting out fires at the 11th hour. So, Pablo pointed out that creativity is key to pave the way and to see where we set course with legislation and actions protecting citizens from a crisis or from chaos. So I would like to ask the panel if the solution is legislate expeditiously, differently, or not to legislate or not to pass so many laws and let judges to build this legal reality where sometimes there's a rough patch, especially with public, private sector, and academic or academia. Okay, I don't know what's your opinion on regulation. I'm gonna speak not as a lawyer, but in general terms. Without being a lawyer, and I know personally because I have friends that are prosecutors and lawyers, there are two types of legislations. laws that are soft and stringent application and enforcement, and then stringent enforcement and soft laws, like in the case of Argentina. Without being a lawyer, I don't know if there's a vacuum in legal terms. Because in the case of IT crime laws, even though we need to revise it with technology that was not existent at that time, there are terms generic enough so with a judge that is willing to proceed with the case may do so. For example, interrupt an IT system as part of the sanctions of the criminal code supervising cybercrime. That was not contemplated in 1999, but this is enforced nowadays. Beyond laws, I know laws are necessary, and you may require legislation, laws like good practices. I believe that we have the necessary tools to investigate, but we require more awareness in the enforcement of that law and the necessary protocols that should be based on AI, cyber surveillance, gathering evidence. So with the protocols, awareness, and willingness, there are enough tools to proceed with that. But it's my personal view from the IT point of view. From those of us that manufacture and produce technology, as long as individuals, evidently governments and state have the necessary tools, there are ways of fighting crime and there are more options to fight these problems. But having the expectations or hopes up that there's going to be a law and that is going to solve all things will be mistaken because just by the mere drafting a document, that document is not going to work. Just not by allocating a budget, I mean, as if I magic, you're not going to enforce it or you're not going to make it work. We all know that we need to deploy it correctly. And also, I would like to resume the issue of harmonization. Harmonization is necessary because when we talk about cybercrime, cybersecurity, etc., when we talk about cybercrime, it's because something happened. We made mistakes in the past, and that has led us to this situation. When we speak of culture and governance, it's because from that perspective onwards, we need to work with prevention or on prevention. And prevention has different pillars. In this phase or chapter in Latin America, we should embrace carefully, as you have done with more talents, this, because we have opportunities to solve the same problems with the same technology. We need to be careful. We need to do it assessing the risk. However, the issue of having a lot of technology at your disposal helps us improving the life of individuals. We shouldn't set aside that perspective. And on the other hand, this issue that may be easier said than done is this cooperation. Not to think that something is going to solve a problem by itself or is going to be solved by a single organization. That's why in this industry we said that there's academia, government, private institutions, that they all share information, should be sharing information to be prepared, to be ready. And given these complexities, the cooperation among these organizations is what really can help solve or overcome things in the long term. What I would like to share and is that Latin America has been embracing and adopting technology. There lies quite a few opportunities because there are a wealth of resources that we're missing out, not only in companies but in different sectors, that they need to bring new ideas, and we should live up to the challenges in order to elevate ourselves. To as we are training new talents, we will find more efficient and more realizable solutions in all fields.
Nada más que agregar, me parece que él cerró el panel.
I think the key words have been cooperation, collaboration, multiple stakeholders, government, academy, civil society, private organizations,